They pledged to follow me when they thought I was alive. They turned when they thought I was gone. So I will come back from the dead and lay claim to what I am owed.
Very rarely in television do we find that a show is able to get stronger and stronger with each new season. Well, thus far, Black Sails is definitely one of those shows, as it continued its tremendous run of form with yet another fantastic third year. After quickly rising up the ranks to be known as one of the most quality shows on TV, Season 3 did not let up for a second. It seems like the show's budget and production value just keeps on rising at an astronomical rate, or at least that's what it feels like. Last year's finale was a spectacle in itself, but this year, everything just seemed to be bigger, better, and be ever more impressive. One of the most satisfying elements about this show has always been its character growth. In both my Season 1 and 2 reviews, I've said that each time that John Silver was the man who had grown the most. And for Season 3, it was exactly the same. Now he is an influential figure to his crew and everyone else around him. Whenever he speaks, you listen. He holds your attention for every single word, as Luke Arnold once again puts in a masterclass of a performance. Silver now effectively stands shoulder to shoulder with Flint. The dynamic between the pair has always been one of the most gripping parts of the show to follow, and recently there had always been a large amount of friction between the both of them. And remember, it was Silver who orchestrated the plan, and a successful plan at that, to retrieve the Urca gold before Flint in the first place. You knew sooner or later that Flint was going to find out the truth, as the pair are effectively destined to have an inevitable falling out, but that time was not now. Silver laid his cards on the table this year in an attempt to end the dissension between the both of them. He admitted everything. So it was going to go one of two ways. Flint accepted Silver's admission, garnered more respect for him and began to account for him, or he'd just turn around and kill him. Now whether or not he chose the former of the choices purely because he was exhausted and had barely no food or water in days, we don't know. But from that point on, each of them began to work as partners. The finale put into perspective the true scale of how far Silver had came. The entire plan of attack against the English hinged on the shoulders of Dobbs, a man whom Silver recently had beaten for disobeying his orders. Flint was of course mystified as to why he chose such a man for a vital task, as he would surely hold a lot of resentment for him. But Silver knew what he was doing. It wasn't resentment that Dobbs held, it was shame. The shame of having disappointed him and wanting the opportunity to redeem himself, to get back in Silver's good books per se. Silver knew then that he was one of a kind. He existed alone in that his crew both liked and feared him. And as stories are told, it is said that the only man Captain Flint ever truly feared was his own quartermaster. And with Silver now effectively untouchable in the ranks of his own crew, you can begin to see reasons why. It is incredibly satisfying character development, and it wouldn't surprise me if Season 3 is heralded as the rise of Long John Silver.
Tomorrow you will join us, or you will all be looking over your shoulders the rest of your lives. My name is John Silver, and I've got a long fucking memory.
Now we had a lot of new stuff going on this year and plenty of new faces in town. Last year ended as Vane rescued Flint from being hanged back in Charlestown, whilst Jack and Anne recovered the remains of the Urca de Lima's gold. Well, the resolution to that plot was surprisingly swift. We took a short time jump where an agreement had been reached between all of the involved parties. The gold was agreed to be split, and some to be used in restoring Nassau's defences. Now, the English set sail for Nassau this year, which was the beginning of a potential endgame. The head of the pack and newly appointed leader of New Providence Island was Woodes Rogers, a man who was determined to see law and order return to the island. But he couldn't take it by force. He knew that there would be far too much resistance. So at his side was Eleanor Guthrie. Okay, so Who else hates Eleanor as much as I do now? She's essentially the big bad alongside Woodes Rogers, but probably more so I feel considering the amount of animosity that most of the main characters in the show are now feeling towards her. Her actions are treacherous as she continues to stop at nothing to achieve her goal, including hurting anyone that may stand in her way. For a lot of this season, I believed she might have been manipulating Woodes to her liking. I mean, she is doing that, but I thought that she would be still intent on seeing hers and Flint's vision for Nassau come to fruition. Well, that idea is certainly gone now. I can't say I was ever a huge fan of hers in the first place, as she always acted very selfishly, but I think in general now a lot of Black Sails fans will be gunning for her head in a noose. And I am hoping that her time comes sooner rather than later. We also stepped foot on an island that I'm sure plenty of you will have heard of before, in Treasure Island. It's not exactly called that yet or fully set in stone, but it's pretty obvious that the island Flint and Co spent most of the season on is that very famous island. Finding Ben Gunn, who ended up joining the crew's ranks, also strengthens it to be pretty much a fact now. The link though that brought the Islanders closer to Nassau through none other than Mr. Scott was genius. I never even remotely considered the possibility, even though it was staring me in the face. I never even gave it a thought of to whom the husband of the island's queen could be. Now looking back at it once you already know, it made complete sense. The revelation that he had been sending the slaves back to his island as a means for protecting and aiding his own people was done perfectly. And Flint's speech to the Islanders was easily one of the best scenes of the whole season. Once he was able to convince them to join his cause, as in the long term it would be beneficial to both parties, they worked on a plan together that would see both the pirates and the Islanders overcome the overwhelming odds against the English invasion. They worked to their advantages, using the island, an unknown to the enemy, to lure them into a trap. And thanks to the tactics of both Flint and Silver, they were able to take down a high-ranking enemy and traitor to the pirates in Captain Hornigold. Another addition to this season, and in my view definitely one of the biggest, is that we had the legendary pirate Blackbeard join the show, who was being portrayed by actor Ray Stevenson. He brought his commanding demeanour, presence and leadership to the screen, and we saw firsthand what violence he is capable of after being outnumbered in the opening scene of the season. That wasn't the only time he impressed though, he continued to do so time after time again. His clever tactics in battle led him to multiple victories in situations where he was the underdog, and without him there would have been no victory at the end of the season. Blackbeard was this season's ace card that was played to absolute perfection. He's a hell of a figure though, isn't he? You would not like to head into battle against a man looking as fierce as that. I know I wouldn't. Now Teach popped up here and there throughout the season, and upon hearing of Eleanor's capture, he deemed it the right time to return to Nassau after being banished from there many years ago. He originally helped build the island back at its roots, and you learn quickly that he used to look towards Vane as a son, his heir as it were. But that same woman who helped banish him from the island was the reason why Vane turned his back on him in the first place, which in turn brought their friendship crashing down. I will admit at first I did not think that Blackbeard would make it through this season, but like everyone else I'm sure, I am very glad that he did. Killing off one of the most famous pirates to ever walk the earth in his maiden season could have been thought of in truth as a little abrupt. So I'm very glad that we'll get to see him return in Season 4. Which leads into what I feel was the most harrowing and powerful scene of the season and the show thus far, in the hanging of Charles Vane. Honestly, I'm still shocked now, not in the fact that he died, it was the way he died. If you told me at the beginning of the season that Charles Vane would not be heading into Season 4 and instead hanging from a noose, I'd have told you to get a move on. And boy was I wrong. The entire scene really resonated with you and it struck a delicate chord. Vane has effectively been the third main character in the show, only behind Flint and Silver, but his hanging was shocking in a way that I could have never anticipated. Vane giving Billy a silent nod telling him to stand down, then going on to deliver a calm, meaningful speech designed in stirring up a rebellion, was his sacrifice that he knew was the only way. The pirates surrounding the square had to witness firsthand what the trio of the Governor, Eleanor and England were all capable of. And I'm sure even though that Charles Vane is now gone, his strength and memory will not be forgotten. Vane was the beginning of a catalyst, the catalyst of war, and he died for Nassau.
But they're about to tie the noose.
I know, just
Has at long last been cured,
wait.
and that God's will be done again in Nassau.
Character-wise, aside from Max, who I'm still personally a little bit indifferent about as you can never really tell whose side she is truly on, we are left with Jack and Anne. Jack doesn't have plenty of awesome quotes, doesn't he? Big players like Teach never understood why Vane took such a liking to the man. But watching him, you just can't help it. His charm and humour is infectious, and you can tell that Teach was beginning to warm to him. One of the things that Jack had always cared about the most was his legacy. He wanted to be remembered, and for his name to live on through the ages. So some might have thought it a dumb move by Jack to return to Nassau instead of fleeing with Anne once they had the gems in hand. But Jack was fighting for his legacy. Wood's double-cross and lies weren't even enough to break his spirit, as he kept alive that small shred of hope in knowing that Anne was still out there. And he knew that she would not rest until he was freed. That was something he knew for certain. The loyalty from both Jack and Anne is what kept them going throughout the harsh times this year. They grew much closer again after beginning to spread apart, and seeing them stand together alongside Teach in the battle against the English really was a high point in their story and journey throughout a hard-fought season.
Godspeed, Charles.
Fuck you, Jack.
My overall verdict for the third season of Black Sails is another 9 out of 10. The grand stage of pirate warfare with new additions such as Blackbeard, Treasure Island and the English invasion made Season 3 another high quality year of excellence. The show's seamless blending of multiple storylines alongside its deep, complex and fascinating characters allows you to get fully immersed into the pirate world. Detail brims from every nook and cranny, and you can really tell that their budget must have drastically risen, considering some of the hugely impressive battle scenes that we got multiple times throughout this season. The first episode to really stand out in that regard was episode 2, where we had the ship killer storm. We haven't really experienced any bad weather when out at sea so far, so getting such a treat early on in the season was a great way to start things off. And another reason that I am very thankful for that episode is that it led directly into something I've been personally wanting to see in the show since the very first shot in Season 1. And it is that of the wildlife. Having eluded us until now, what a segment it was as we got Silver laying his truths on the line whilst out hunting sharks alongside Flint. It really was a special scene, and not just because of the conflict between Flint and Silver, because on top of that, they were juggling the danger that was surrounding them. Another great episode was number 6, which gave us Teach fighting off against Flint for who would walk away with Vane and his crew. I won't lie, it was surprising to see Flint beat Teach to the shop considering the amount of time you see Teach wielding his pistols, but it gave you a sudden reminder that Flint isn't half bad himself. And thanks to Silver in episode 7, we finally got to see the end of one of my most hated characters, Dufresne. Silver literally stamped his authority on the situation, and the acting, especially from Luke Arnold, captured every second of your attention. I'm in his debt now though. I've been wanting someone to kill Dufresne for a hell of a long time. So for that, Silver, you get some extra points in my book. The finale once again absolutely blew you away. Just like last year's, this year was the culmination of the English versus the pirates and the islanders. It used constant, smart cutaways to Flint and Silver's discussions, and it was a fantastic way that showed the strengthening of their friendship. To be honest, even in some of the slower paced episodes such as number 5, where Mr. Scott was on his deathbed and Woodes Rogers was trying to newly govern the island, the show still delivered masterfully. We had one of the best speeches in the show today as Flint gave a convincing, impactful speech to the island's queen. It showcased Flint's survivability. He's navigated one hell of a storm, proved his tactical awareness in outmanoeuvring the experienced Captain Hornigold on both land and sea, and saved the lives of him and his crew with that epic speech. Yes, we lost Charles Vane this year, a fan favourite whose fearless and in the end selfless actions will no doubt leave a lasting legacy. And with his death, it will have pushed the personal animosity and bad blood between Eleanor and Teach to an all-time high. You only had to see the look on Teach's face when he received the news. That was a story in itself. And I hope that in some measure he is able to exact revenge against a woman who is far past her time. Will that time come when season 4 arrives? Well, we'll just have to wait and see. If you're interested, check out some of my other Black Sails and TV series reviews, which I'll leave a link down in the description. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Please leave a like, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed the review. And I'll see you on the next one.
Until then, I remain Long John Silver.